joining us today and at home for those who are watching us live. My name is Luria Freeman. I'm a producer and correspondent for Now This, and I've been trusted with this conversation today. I want to give you an idea of who these amazing panelists are. First, we have child psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and co-founder of Humanity Crew, which supports forcibly displaced children and refugee families around the world, Dr. Essam Daod. Secondly, we have, yes, please give it up, please, thank you. Secondly, we have the president and co-founder of the Born This Way Foundation, Cynthia Germanotta. Yes. And the CEO of the American Psychological Association, which has more than 146,000 members, Dr. Arthur Evans. And for anybody who that Germanotta name sounds familiar, I just want to say hi to the little monsters in the crowd and those at home. Hello. Now, Dr. Evans, when I think about first aid services, caring for my mental health isn't really the first thing that comes to mind. How do you define mental health first aid?
Well, I think there are two ways to think about it. You know, first of all, our mental health is very tied to our physical health. And we really can't have a conversation about our health unless we're talking about our mental health. And if you look at how we have dealt with mental health in the US, it has been very compartmentalized. The way we think about help for mental health is going to a therapist, getting psychotherapy or medication and/or medication, and that's the way we treat mental health. But the reality is we should be thinking about our mental health in the same way we think about our physical health. We diet and exercise because we want to stay physically well. There are things that we can do to stay mentally well, and I think a big part of where we want to go is, as a nation, is to put more of our emphasis there. And I think mental health first aid begins to move us outside of what I call the treatment black box. That is, that mental health isn't just what happens in a therapist's office. Mental health is what happens to all of us all of the time. And when we think about mental health first aid, it is about how do we help people at the first signs that they're starting to have problems. Our system works where we basically don't respond to people until they're in crisis. And the thing that I really love about the concept of mental health first aid, and there are different types of programs out there, but what I really love about it is it starts to get us to think upstream at the first signs that people are having difficulty.
Yeah, it's kind of taking ownership for your mental health as you would for your physical health, as you've said. Now, leading up to this conversation, we had a conversation about the importance of community when providing mental health support and services. But we do recognize that not all communities are equipped with the services and resources that they need. When it comes to Humanity Crew, Born This Way Foundation, the American Psychological Association.
You can say APA for short.
The APA, yes. I've got in the word salad. When it comes to all of these organizations, how are you each working to address the disparities in these communities and also provide culturally competent care for the people within them? Dr. Daod, maybe?
First of all, I think we need to work through the people culture, not against it. We need to remember that when we approach any people in crisis, they need to feel safe, they need to feel comfortable. If we bring our own ideas, agenda, beliefs, sometimes it's right, but you can't change it. It's not time for gender equality, for example, when you work with people coming on boats from Iraq. It's not time to start educating about, you know, LGBTQ rights. Because to make changes like this, you need people to be in a more comfortable zone so you can do the work. And if you try to do so, for example, and to do other things, then you work actually against the people culture, and then you will see a backfire. So when you do a work in a crisis zone, you need to understand that you need to work through the people community culture and to accept it and slowly to rebuild the community, because the community heals itself. They don't need us. If you think about like the most catastrophic thing that can happen to someone, to lose a child, and how people continue their lives. because of the community, because even the neighbor that you fight with him every day because of something, he will come and be next to you because this. The people in your community, the church, the school, everyone will come and support you. So the community heals itself. And in time of crisis, when your fight or flight system is awake and your cortisol is up and your prefrontal cortex is not working, you will become in a survival mode. In a survival mode, we go back ages behind and we become like an animal fighting for their life. So the most important thing is to make the people feel safe so they can calm down, regain their abilities to communicate with others, and then just to watch them heal themselves. And it's magic how when you do so, actually the community do the most of the work, and then you will be facing the 8% of what we know in literature of people who really need the professional support and not the 100%.
Yeah, I think that makes absolute sense. And Cynthia, when I think about curating care for specific communities, working specifically with the Born This Way Foundation and younger people, I feel like Gen Z and millennials are the main ones stepping up and being like, I need culturally competent care. I need people who look like me, who represent the communities that I come from, to really step up for me.
Yeah, and we know that because we conduct quite a bit of research, and we also have extensive conversations with young people, and we know that they are looking for resources. They're looking for community, but there are so many inequities, and it's different for various communities. And one of the ways that we're approaching that is by offering preventive type, mental health first aid tools to them. We have a free online 90-minute certificate-based course. It's available in English, French, and Spanish. It's called the Be There Certificate. And it actually teaches young people how to have conversations about mental health, understand when someone's in a crisis, help get them to resources, know the language, and have the confidence to assist them. And generally, young people will turn to each other instead of an adult when they're in time of crisis. So that has been a great preventive resource for young people, and it actually it helps reduce the risk factor of actually developing a mental illness and mitigates that early on. But we also know that youth are looking for different types of culturally competent care, and peer-based education is very important, especially to youth in our research in the Black community, in the transgender community, and also in first-generation students that are going to college. And we don't have enough clinical resources to support that. I mean, the census tells us that in about 20 years, over half of the population in the US will be from minority groups, but only 17% of our psychiatrists are from minority groups. So it's really important that we understand that we tailor and that we actually target treatment to culturally diverse communities, but in a very trusted and empathetic and kind way.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the prevention aspect of things, because I feel like when we talk about mental health, we talk a lot about helping someone during and after an episode or emergency, but I know that prevention is something that you really care about. And Born This Way is so youth-led. Do you have are you seeing or hearing feedback on any improvements that could be made to these prevention methods? What are people feeling like they're not getting out of what's already in place?
Yeah, I think, the biggest deterrent that we see to young people getting help is they don't know where to go and the affordability. So, certainly one way would be to better amplify and advertise where these resources are, hopefully have them for free for young people. But those in particular are two, and also have them to be very relatable to young people. The training that we do is based on conversations with young people. There's actually video clips and real life examples of dealing with mental health crises, and that seems to really resonate with youth.
Yeah. Dr. Evans, working at the APA, I feel like there's been a shift over the past decade or couple decades within the Black community, specifically around mental health, being able to have these conversations, young people really pushing these conversations forward with their elders. But even still, younger Black people in general are topping out some of these statistics, especially around things like suicide ideation. How do we kind of address that imbalance?
The imbalance between
The imbalance
the need,
between people stepping up and wanting to have these conversations, but we're still seeing people within Black communities specifically being adversely impacted.
Gotcha. You know, I think it's changed a lot. I think there's still the gap that you're referring to, but when I came into the field 30 years ago, people didn't talk in general about mental health. And now you have all kinds of people who are talking about it. And specifically, people didn't talk about it in the African American community. That has changed a lot in the last, I would say, 15 years. And I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, you've seen a real acceleration in very prominent African Americans coming out talking about mental health. So I think we're getting there, but it really comes down to, I think, a few things. I was a mental health commissioner before I became CEO in the city of Philadelphia. And one of the things that we learned is that how you talk about these issues matters. So let me give you an example. So one of the groups that we really wanted to reach was Black men, African American men, Latino men, Asian men, because we know that those are groups that access services at a much lower rate than other groups. And so we started doing storytelling events that allowed people to talk about their experiences. But we didn't talk about mental health or mental illness. We talked about mental strength and people talking about what they had done to be successful. That simple reframing of the issue allowed us a way to have access and allow people to have access to that issue that had we come with sort of a traditional verbiage around mental health, we want to talk to you about depression or anxiety or depression, don't think we would have gotten as far. And so I think, as a field, we have to do more to meet people where they're at. What Essam said, that, people, have a worldview. You have to understand that worldview. We have to modify our language, the way we approach things, and to deal with things outside of the sort of traditional settings that we typically deal with these issues. So where are the places that people are comfortable? If people are comfortable in their house of worship, if they're comfortable in a local community center, if they're comfortable even in their school or workplace, those are the places we have to go and have these conversations as opposed to requiring people to come to us and using our own language around this.
Yeah, it seems so simple, but it's so powerful, just a reframing of words. Even in journalism, using like human first language to approach people with, you're living with something instead of struggling with something, can really reframe someone's mindset around what they might be dealing with internally. I love that.
Can I say something else? Because you reminded me of another thing. I have this saying, inherent in every community is the wisdom to solve its own problems. And one of the things that we did when I was commissioner was, rather than going into communities and defining and saying to a community, say take an immigrant community, we know your community has problems, we have these nice programs over here, we want your people to come to our programs. Rather, turn that on its head, go to the community with humility and say, we know your community has issues. How do you understand those issues? And what do you see as the solutions? People came up with really creative ways of dealing with mental health issues. For example, Vietnamese communities talked about women who had been widows. Their husbands had been in the Vietnam War. They were now in this country, very isolated and very depressed. The traditional solution to that would be, let's get these women on antidepressants or into groups. What the community said, though, is, we think the issue is isolation, and if you help us fund these, what they call Jook breakfasts, J-O-O-K breakfasts, we will have these women connect with the children in the community, kindergartners. They can have that role, that maternal role that was very important for them. And that was a solution that we implemented, and it made a huge difference. And I don't think we would have gotten there had we gone in with our solutions, but allowing communities to find their own solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Dr. Daod, you have the unique experience of traveling the world and providing psychological support to people after major catastrophes. I believe you have a video that you wanted to share with the audience. I think we can play that now if we have it.
Yeah, it's a lovely video.
It is. I've seen it. It's nice.
It's one of the things that we do is actually we try to help the kids build their own narrative in crises, because kids, different than adults, they don't have the ability to understand all this cruel world and bad things that are happening around. You know, by nature they are good. We, the adults, make them in somehow, you know, feeling bad. So they are crying and they are afraid because their mom is crying and their dad and their neighbors and the atmosphere and everything, but they don't really understand why someone is bombing them or why there is a wind that blew the house away and etc. So it's really important when we work with them, especially with the kids, is to be the outside resources that they don't have, and not to give them the narrative and to tell them, okay, this is 1, 2, 3, this is what happened to you, because it's the same, they can't. Just to make a game with them, to play with them. This is, you know, play is one of the most important things for kids. And when we play with them, we help them to build a new narrative that fit them. They are the heroes who cross the sea. They are the heroes who survive things. And this is how we slowly help them see the crisis as sometimes not bad, but also something powerful. So even at the beginning, we say in the Humanity Crew, we exist to prevent post-trauma and trauma. Now we say that we exist to transform trauma into a source of growth. Because there is a PTSD and there is post-traumatic growth. And I think if we do the right thing in the right time, it's not 2 weeks or 3 weeks after, or it's just another service that we provide. Mental health should be equal to any kind of rescue services. If it's a shooting in a school, it's a hurricane, it's a fire, it doesn't matter. We are rescue human beings, not cars and machines. So this video is actually it's actually the first one. And when I did it, I didn't know, I was even like, I used to be a surgeon before a psychiatrist. So I was more surgeon than a psychiatrist. But then when they sent me the video clip, it was a producer who did a documentary about something, like about the incidents. And he said, I didn't use this part, but I couldn't delete it. I don't know, I just make this video clip for you. And when I saw it, I said, God, I did something here. At the beginning, I want to call it Benigni Project because of the movie Life is Beautiful by Roberto Benigni, about the Holocaust, with the kid that he played with him in a concentration camp. And he said, if you hide from the Nazis and stuff, you can have gifts and points and etc. And this is how Roberto Benigni in the movie hide his kid from the Nazis. And then the end, when the American came and liberate the concentration camp, the prize was in the movie that he's gonna win a tank, and then the American soldiers have him in the tank. So, and I say, God, it's the same thing. And since then, we are developing this and trying to help the kids. So this video is actually telling the story of the first hero kid of Humanity Crew. His name is Omar. It's from, he's a Syrian kid who arrived in the Greek island of Lesbos.
They're rolling it now. They're rolling.
Yep.
There it is.
This is after the rescue operation is finished. And we have this kind of a play, a game with the press that we ask from them to take pictures of the hero kid at the end, and they show them, so they print the picture, their own picture in their mind.
What I love about this is that you're right. Kids are really the main characters in all of their stories. And so reframing that narrative for them, giving them a new story to live in is so powerful. How do you take these experiences that you're having around the world, how do you repackage them for parents in everyday lives, lower stakes situations? How do you give them the mental health first aid tools to carry out that for themselves without someone like you around?
On the 1st of September 2001, we had a crazy car accident. Me, my wife, and our 2 babies. Crazy one. Someone just crossing the red light. He smashed our car. Even now I'm checking, we survived. But during the ambulances and the police came, and there was a lot of noise. It was night, and the kids were asleep, and they wake up, and they're like 2 years old and 3 years old. And I found myself a little bit panicking, and then I calm my wife down, and then we start again. The police found me inside his car playing with the wee with my kid, and he said, "Sir, what you're doing? Get out of the car. There's a car accident scenario here." I say, "Yeah, it's me in the white Jeep." He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "We're playing with the kids. I don't want panicking stuff and trauma for my kids." And after 5 minutes, my girl was with the paramedics in the ambulance, helping, like putting the plasters and stuff for the mom. And the other one, he loves the police, so he was with the police, and he's going around and like opening the street for the road for the other cars and stuff. And then we go to the hospital. So this kind of first response is in our daily life. And now every time we pass from this junction, or when we talk about the car accidents, they like, and really, I'm honest, they love the accident. Like, it's a good thing for them. It's like a little bit weird, I know, but
you did a good job.
Yeah, I asked my baby Reef, I asked, "Reef, what do you think?" "Oh, police." And since then, he's like in love with the police. And Alma is the same thing. So it's in our daily life. We can do it with our neighbors. You know, it's a damage that is unseen. You know, it's much easier when I was a surgeon to say, okay, if you don't want to treat, if you don't do this in time, in the real time, when the car accident is happening, then you will have a massive bleeding, and a stroke, and many things. So it's a seen thing. People will react to this. But in mental health, if you don't do it, you have a chance of 8% to 12% to develop post-trauma, adjustment, depression, anxiety, somatization. And we're talking about disorders that it needs a lot of therapy. It's productivity and how they can fit in the society in the future. It kills the potential of the people. And to do and to help them after that, you need therapists, you need psychologists, clinical social worker, you need people with experience. It's a process of healing and treatment. It costs a lot of money and time, and the prevalence of success is not that high always. Instead, if you do the right thing in the right time, not waiting 2 weeks and 3 weeks, and if every policeman and every paramedic and every person and as we do the CPR, we know how to do the other CPR. I call it CPR because I think it's a cognitive psychological resuscitation. This is my CPR. So if people know how to do CPR, both for the body and the mind, then we will prevent. And prevention is a single act. It doesn't cost money, and you don't need a psychologist to do it. Trust me, when there is a car accident, you don't want the head of the surgery department next to you. You want the paramedic next to you. The head of the surgery department, he's good in his surgery room. So you don't need to train psychologists and doctors and psychiatrists to do so. You need to train people as you train them for CPR.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Dr. Evans was saying earlier about like taking your power back in these situations and really stepping up for your mental health. Like you said, training people in these situations, not just think about the physical body, but how this is going to live within someone as they leave that space. Cynthia, there are so many misconceptions about mental health, and I feel like, especially mental health when it comes to young people, I feel like there's always this thought that like they'll grow out of it or they'll get over it. What are some of the more ridiculous things that you've heard people say about mental health treatment?
About the treatment itself?
About treatment, caring for young people's mental health, just being in this industry. What are some things that you hear and you're just like, that's not it?
Yeah. I don't know that it's what I've heard other than what I experienced in my own family. And, you know, our foundation exists because of my daughter's mental health experiences that started in middle school. She was about 14, and that's about 50% of mental health issues develop by the age of 14. And as a mom, I didn't really understand what was happening. I didn't have the language. I grew up, I guess, in a time of true grit where you just kind of learn to buck up and get on with it. So I was taught, you know, it's those intergenerational differences. I was really taught to, like, you don't talk about it, you just be strong and you move on. And to me, maybe that's, I don't know if ridiculous is the word, but that stigma around just
Misguided.
yeah, just keeping your head down and working your way through it. And that's, you know, not in fact, you know, what's going to happen. But just an observation, I think, on your story that I would love to share. We do a lot of work researching and kindness and its effect on mental health and building kind communities. And the kindness that you showed to this young boy, like in Greece, I mean, most likely changed the trajectory of his life, right? It could have been a really horrible experience, and yet it changed. I'm sure it was very much a life-changing experience for him as well as his family.
And for me.
And for yourself as well, right? And if you can think about kindness in the context of prevention, right, and integrating it into your everyday life, we learn a lot from young people that experiencing more kindness would improve their mental health. And the things that would improve it are quite simple. They're things like listening to them when they have a problem, believing in them, and encouraging them to do their best, asking them how they are. You know, simple things that we can all do. I mean, my daughter often says, kindness is free, but it's priceless, and we all have it, you know, to give. So I want to make that observation because what you do is very powerful, and kindness can be those acts can be very underrated in those kinds of situations. So, and that's everybody in this room can participate in that and share that kindness, and it actually will improve the mental health, particularly of young people in your lives.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Now, this is a question for all of you, but I think I'll start with Dr. Evans. This session is called Mental Health First Aid Minutes Matter. Can you speak to the importance of not wasting time when it comes to funding and proliferating mental health resources for the people that need it?
Yeah, you know, we have so much untreated and unrecognized mental health challenges in the country. The majority of people in this nation who have a mental health challenge will never seek treatment or never come into a treatment program. Only 10% of the people who have a substance use problem will access treatment. So the overwhelming majority of people in our communities who have these challenges are not getting any help or any care. The time between the first onset of problems and the time that people actually get into care, for those who do get into care, is sometimes years. For some people, it's decades. I've worked with people who've had early childhood trauma. They're in treatment 50, 60 years old, and they're just coming to deal with those issues. So, you know, the issue of time is important on multiple dimensions. So one is just as a nation, we have to start working much further upstream. Most people who do get care are getting it in crisis situations. So just in terms of the development of the problems, we need to have ways of working with people before they have a mental health diagnosis. It's a huge problem in this nation because our whole healthcare system is based on the idea of having a diagnosis and treating an illness. It is not based on how do we help people stay healthy if they're healthy, how do we intervene at the earliest possible moment. It is how do we help people after they have a diagnosis. And so I think this issue of time really is about a shift in our paradigm from treating illness to helping people to get healthy and stay healthy. The other way that time is important is just in terms of the onset. As I mentioned early, many people, if you go to a typical substance use program, most of the women in that program will have some kind of trauma history. The big secret is most of the men will as well, and we don't talk about that. And if we don't have ways of identifying, one of the things that we did when I was a commissioner was we started screening children in pediatric settings and primary care settings. At the time I left that position, we had screened about 30,000 children. A third of them screened positive for exposure to trauma. And that allowed us to then take those kids and move them into evidence-based trauma treatments. That was one of the things I was most proud of as commissioner, because I knew that for many of those children, they were going to have a very difficult life that would often lead to substance use, would lead to all kinds of other problems. And so this issue of time really is about us rethinking when we intervening at the earliest possible moment, and making sure that we're focused on people getting well, not just treating illness.
Yeah, Cynthia?
I also think when you think of time, you can actually make a difference if you are not a clinician. I think that we view help as therapeutic in nature, and it doesn't always have to be that. And I think just as there are minutes with things like CPR and administering CPR, there can be minutes in helping somebody who's in a mental health crisis. And I have many, many stories around that. But about a third of the young people that we've spoken to said they don't have reliable access to mental health resources. And that number is even higher for other communities. It's higher, it's closer to half for the LGBTQ community. It's closer to half for the Black community. So what do we do in the meantime, right? And we really need to help people, now rather than wait. We do encourage, all companies to step up now and develop appropriate preventive training and tools, for young people. But we can do things in the meantime, things like the peer-based training that I mentioned, the Be There certificate. One of the other things that we're doing is asking young people where they go in their communities for support. And we're funding those organizations. We're accelerating their capacity and their ability to help young people. And they're grassroots organizations, but they're incredible and they're doing effective and wonderful work. And we're trying to help them augment delivering those services to more young people. In the meantime, last year, we put $1 million into those organizations, about 22 of them in different communities around the country, and it helps with the impact of mental health on those youth and generally in those communities. So yes, we need a long-term view, but in the meantime, I think, we as lay citizens, there are things that we can do and there in our communities to provide support. And the other thing that I would advocate very heavily is changing the narrative in social media. I mean, it's very much kind of fear and shame-based. It's a dark place to be for many people, but it can also be used to really leverage providing a positive and a helpful environment for young people. And we would also encourage very heavily the companies that own and operate those sites to provide really quality content, engage young people in what that is. Young people find comfort online. It improves their mental health when resources are shared with them online. One of our youth advisors, Desmond, who's 16 years old, he said that his lifeline is online support, where he reads, really informative articles. He does journaling. He can chat with psychiatrists, online. So leveraging social media in a very positive way with the youth voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I want to say, give it up for that fundraising achievement.
Yeah.
$1 million is not chump change. Thank you. Now, Dr. Daod, when you think about funding and proliferating these resources, you've been in parts of the world where really it does come down to money a lot of the times to get people the help that they need. And we've also had conversations about people in the West not necessarily being able to connect with the things that you might be seeing in these communities. What's on your heart about how we could be doing better for these people?
You know, when you ask about stigma, stigma is about mental health. It's even in the West. You know, you have it maybe more in the East, but it comes also to funding. You know, when we ask for funding for our work, even the donors that give us the money, you see that they have some kind of hesitation, because when you send the reports, oh, all goes for salaries. Yeah, it's psychologists where like, I can't buy pizza with this. So even for us it's hard. When we write the reports, like before they react to the reports, we feel bad about this. So because the stigma is also inside us. You know, my dad until now, he's depressed because I'm not a surgeon anymore. So he's like, he used to walk in the village. I'm the father of the...
Well, now he's the mental health lifeguard. So, yeah.
It doesn't matter for him. He wants me to be It doesn't work. Don't try. So we have this problem in the issues of funding mental health, and when it comes also for programs of rescue, and like we come back from 1 month in Turkey. We arrived 3 days after, and I was like, God, what are you doing? Like they had some kind of a program from the European Union for funding the rescue operation, and nothing comes for mental health. And I say, why? And they say, no, after we finish the rescue and take the people out of the houses and stuff. I said, I have this 3-year-old baby with me 2 days. I don't know who's the parents is. Like, what kind of life I can do? Like, I'm the only person here, me and my team, talking about mental health. So even for big NGOs and people who work in the field for years, when you see a catastrophe like earthquake or hurricane, or it's still... The physical needs is overcome the mental health, and it comes for really generous donors that can give you some here and some there, and it's a fight for sustainability all the time. So, for example, now we're not talking about that we are coming from the other side of the world, that we are, you know, from the Middle East trying to help in the West, but what we are trying now to do in what we do is traveling 26 hours until here to Aspen to talk about this, and really to advocate and to try to be in everywhere so people can really understand that it's minutes matters, and it's not an extra thing, it's really what matters in the end. And we saw it in places in the crisis zones. When you go and talk with people, they want to talk with you. Like sometimes you have food, they don't want it. They start talking with you. They need to be heard. They need to tell their stories and their pain, and etc. So we see the need that people need. And I hope in forum like this and others, and when we talk, that the philanthropy world, the people who, you know, the policy making, and on the other hand, we can't just only, you know, talk with the philanthropy. I think it's also something that have to be in the institution itself, in the governments, and the policy, that if you send an aid, you have to be 50-50. If you are trying to rescue a robot, so it doesn't matter, send just only physical things, but it's a human being. It needs also to address his mental health issues and needs and etc. So it's a fight. You know, we already exist almost 10 years now, and we're still fighting every year. You know, the first thing that happened in COVID, it's that they cut the funding, which is the opposite. So what's supposed to be, but in the we know this. You know, it starts from our room as a psychiatrist, a psychotherapist, you know, fighting the stigma, the awareness, until the high levels of talking and about emissions in earthquake and etc. So I think there's a movement. I think people start acknowledging more these needs, especially after the COVID, but still a lot needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being coming from Turkey to Aspen to share this message.
No, from Israel.
Israel,
Palestine.
Yes. To spread this message here, to make sure people hear these amazing stories that you're carrying with you. I did want to leave some time to open it up to the audience for questions. We have some eagerness right here at the front. If I can get the microphone, please. If you can stand, say your name, where you're from,
Great.
and then your question for our panelists.
My name is Chip Edens, and I oversee a Christian congregation of about 5,000. And I deal every day with a crisis, and I'm trying to figure out how to organize my congregation. It has perhaps 1,000 youth in it to take the sort of journey toward wellness. And I'd like to ask you, in a world where there is such focus on wellness as perfection, sort of achieving a look, a goal, a perfect state, how would you define wellness in this current moment that we're in? And what would you say to someone who says, okay, I've awoken now, I want to take the journey of wellness. Where do I begin, and how do I know if I'm well?
Well, I think it's a really great question, and I want to come back to the second part of your question too, because I think it's really important. How do faith communities deal with these issues? Our field, healthcare in general, has defined health as the absence of illness. Wellness is more than the absence of illness. Most people have heard of Maslow and talking about self-actualization and those kinds of things. But I firmly believe that if our goal is more than the absence of illness, and it's really trying to achieve those things to optimize our mental health, optimize the kinds of our social connections and those kinds of things, that is much more important, and it's protective for developing other mental health challenges. I think in terms of thinking about your congregation, I think, and it sounds like you're from a Christian congregation, I think there's been a change both within the Christian community as well, where not just the Christian community, but the Muslim community, a lot of religious communities, where people are recognizing that they cannot do ministry without dealing with these issues. There's not one ministry in your church, I can guarantee you, where there aren't people who are experiencing mental health challenges, and those challenges are a challenge to the people trying to carry out those ministries. So one way to think about it, I think about it as a sort of a pyramid, and sort of think about 3 levels of broad groups of people in your church. There are people who clearly have serious mental health challenges. They have a diagnosable condition. And the question there is, can you be a facilitator in connecting those folks to care? And the answer is yes. And in fact, you probably have clinicians in your congregation who can help you do that. Then sort of in the middle part, you have people who don't quite rise to that level, but they are struggling. And you saw a lot of that during the pandemic, where you saw frontline healthcare workers were really struggling. They were under a tremendous amount of stress. They didn't have a diagnosis, but they were struggling. And for that part of your congregation, you could think about interventions that can be directed at the types of issues that people are dealing with. So if those issues are arising out of work stress, you might have some support groups around that. If those issues are arising out of just parenting and the challenges there, you might have some specific groups that are focused around those specific issues that are driving the distress that people are experiencing. And then sort of at the bottom part of the pyramid, you have the general congregation, people who are not really experiencing problems. And I think it's really important to think about, how do we help people stay healthy? And one of the ways to do that is to improve people's mental health literacy. There is actually a formal program called Mental Health First Aid. We've kind of used the term more generically here, but there is a program called Mental Health First Aid. It's a 1-day course. Your congregation can take it. And what it does, it doesn't make you a counselor or that kind of thing, but what it does is it helps people to understand sort of basic ideas about mental health, how to connect people when they see that a family member or a friend is having difficulty. And what I've experienced in my own sort of work is people love it. you would think that there would be resistance. We don't really know. It's the exact opposite, because family members are already dealing with these issues, and what you're doing is you're giving them a tool. You're putting something in their hands that they can use to help deal with those issues. So I think sort of thinking about your congregation holistically, not just the people who are having problems, but having an overall strategy really helps. And the other thing that it does, it starts to signal to your congregation that this is an issue that we can talk about, and that helps to reduce stigma and helps people to get the help that they need.
Perfect. I think we have time for one more quick question. Right here? Yes. Also, can you please stand and say where you're from?
Hi, I'm Nastasia. I'm from New York City. I am currently studying to become a social worker, specifically in child welfare, hopefully. So there's just like things that keep me up at night a little bit with like the intersection of mental health first aid when it comes to kids, specifically in the US. And it seems sometimes I can't tell if it's a loud minority or if it's a growing number of people in the United States who are sort of pushing back against the idea of community care. So like as someone who might be in a community trying to help kids in a moment of crisis, what can you really do when you're also then working against a climate where they don't feel like they can speak on what it is that is causing them to be in crisis, because it's now dangerous to speak on like those.
The politicization.
Right, exactly. And I don't know if any of you have come up against that in your work in the last couple of years, but it's definitely something that I'm nervous about, how to be an effective care provider if that continues to grow as a sentiment in the US.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Cynthia, I think that really aligns with Born This Way's work.
Yes, I just want to be sure that I'm clear on the specific issue that you're worried about in terms of, is it that the community's not responding to?
Sorry, so I mean specifically like in schools, we're seeing that there's a movement towards saying, well, we're not going to talk about racism, we're not going to talk about homophobia, we're not going to talk about X, Y, and Z. Those conversations don't belong in that place. This is the domain of parents only, and you can't give a kid community care if that's what they're needing, if they're not allowed to come to a trusted adult in a space like school that should be safe.
Yeah, I mean, we worry about that as well, and if they're not going to get it at the school, they have to get it somewhere, and that's when it comes from us. Just, we spend a great deal of time not only modeling healthy conversations and work ourselves, but talking to other people, young people and parents about how to do that. Young people spend a great deal of time online. Those are spaces where they can learn, to your point, Dr. Evans, the mental health literacy and the language that they need to support one another even. It's a very complicated question that you ask, and I see why you're struggling with it. But I think we have a responsibility to these young people to give them a platform to talk about that and learn about that. Learning is wisdom, and we can take action from that. I don't know if I'm completely answering your question, but we still have to take that step with youth.
Well, thank you all for joining us here today at Aspen Ideas Help for Mental Health First Aid Minutes Matter. Can I get a round of applause for my panelists, please? Thank you so much. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.